So what we hear is that you did hog a lot of attention space of your CEO when you were handling public affairs, and that made probably the CEO do well. Sugato, are there enough people, those of us who are not CEOs, those of us who want to do well in public affairs, how do we really go about it? What are the 2 or 3 key messages you might want to send to all of us here?
Public affairs, as we have been discussing, you can understand, it's a complicated process. You have to understand the environment. And in that environment, there are several players. Government is one end. Government policy making process is another important element. So, and then again, as Rajiv had mentioned, these NGOs play nowadays a very important role. They try to play a spoil sport also, as they tried to do in one of my clients' case, Coal India IPO. I think, I hope they are not there in Greenpeace. Anyway, the issue is that environmental lobby is there, even local political lobby is there. And of course, with Mr. Kejriwal's example, there will be many such people. Of course, earlier, Mamata Banerjee also did similar thing on Tatas. In fact, despite doing all kind of public affairs or public relation, they failed and they had to, retire hard from Singur. Whether good or bad for West Bengal, I'm not going into that. But so what you have to do, you really have to be introspective. You really have to understand the process, and you really have to project a scenario that how will you control? I mean, who are your problem areas and how will you control that? And I think that element is in everybody. Only thing, you have to be patient enough, cultivate the talent in you, and come up to it.
Right, so we do see a shortage of talent coming out from what the moderator's assessment of the situation is right now. There is a certain market bandwidth which we need to bridge. But what are the true ways in which Indian public affairs industry is really falling short? Is it reliability, trustworthiness? Is it because people don't adequately understand it as a good career choice, Sugato?
Actually, forget about career. As a business choice, whether it is good or bad, that is also an issue with many of the people who are in that business. Particularly, perhaps, after the collapse of Vaishnavi, people will be extremely careful to venture into public affairs so openly. Public affairs everywhere, if you look at it, even in USA, there is a term called revolving door. The people who have experience in lawmaking process, they come and join various other K Street firms, that is the lobbying firms. Here also, you cannot expect a youngster from this room all of a sudden to push through that revolving door and develop his or her talent into that. So I think it needs experience, and I mean, you have to groom yourself into that.
Right. Rajiv?
Yeah, I think the answer was really in your question. The issue really is about finding people, organizations that are reliable, that are consistent, that are trustworthy, that understand confidentiality, that understand what your corporate value system is. So for example, you can work in an organization where you have a $50 limit for a gift, and it has to be disclosed, right? And this is true across the world. So a bribe is not an option, okay? And that's, therefore, as you grow up in your career, you realize that, and therefore you never even consider it because that's how it is. And if you have an element of public policy that disagrees with what your business objective is, and if you need to make a case for it, I think understanding what that policy is, what affects you. So for example, why does the Ridley Turtle only affect POSCO's business while everybody else goes around building their factories and their ports in Odisha? Right? Why did the Mamata Banerjee agitation only affect the nano factory while everybody else built their factories? Right? That's the reason why public affairs practitioners work for specific issues, and they don't apply to all. They don't apply to everybody else. They only apply to you. Right? So understanding the business, understanding its environment, and then being able to compete without disadvantage. Okay, that's the thing. People talk about creating competitive advantage. Public affairs takes away a disadvantage.
Well, I think Walmart must have had $50 limits, but there are things that happen anyway. So is it also on the CEO to actually not push the public affairs person to get appointments and work and those sorts of really sordid and specific stuff. Is it really on the leadership and to be able to sell it as good ethical practice rather than to seek short-term country-specific results?
Yeah, no, it is actually. And in fact, I can say this with complete honesty, that CEOs of large American multinationals, whenever they have abused or have the authority to abuse, public affairs function stands independent and has the authority to disabuse them of that authority. There are positions that are there, and the public affairs role actually performs that role. And without getting into the specific details, one of the top 5 global leadership team members of one of the companies actually lost their job because they misused the corporate jet when they were flying from destination A to destination B and took a tourism stopover on the way. And 3 months later, there was a complaint and he lost his job.
What if a minister says or a secretary sends a small signal that they like to hop along? How would you deny them that? It's more than $50, right?
Yeah, no, there are certain ways in which each one of those ethical questions are addressed. As a part of corporate ethics training that everybody goes through, you actually look at various scenarios. You have a vendor who's giving you tickets to Madison Square Garden to watch the New York Knicks play. Is that an ethical, So there are several such situations which may seem quite ordinary. If somebody gives me tickets to watch Delhi Daredevils play Pune Warriors here, would I go? And then does that mean that I've crossed the ethical line? So there are several such examples which are part of corporate ethical training, which are different from company to company, but they are largely the same. And having done this across multiple countries in roles when I've looked at it, I can tell you this, that business environment, regulators, government officials across different countries are not that different. So the whole thing is characterized by how different they are not. So if you think that what you learn and perform in India, you can't perform in Indonesia, not true.
No, as far as you were giving example of USA. Now, for instance, in India, we do not have this kind of foreign contribution payment act or something of that sort. Here, of course, a minister may or somebody else may demand some kind of gratification. And if you do not pay, your competitor may win. You may lose. So what do you do under such circumstances?
Yeah, that's a tough call. That's the point. The thing is this, to never make it a win or lose situation. That's what public affairs does. You make sure that you're able to get a decision in your favor without allowing it to come to a this or that option. That's why proactive public affairs, and that's the reason why I said, when you build a practice which is working irrespective of the season, which is working irrespective of the business situation, which is creating relationships, information dissemination, which is creating relationships from the point of view of what your performance is, what your position is on various matters, then you don't get into a this or that situation.